On this Friday night, one of Canada's worst E. coli outbreaks spawns legal action. The mounting outrage among parents.
Hey kids, I shouldn't be having to go through this.
And what one little girl is now enduring.
Your birthday, we can't do it anymore because you're going to be in the hospital for the next month.
The goal to eliminate the toxic culture that's long poisoned elite men's hockey.
It's going to take time.
And the criticism against how complaints are investigated.
I wish I had reported.
And should it stay or should it go? The push for a restoration instead of a demolition at 24 Sussex Drive.
Global National with Farah Nasser. Reporting tonight, Nitu Garcha.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. Alberta's pediatric health system is being pushed to the brink tonight. Hospitals are dealing with one of the biggest E. coli outbreaks involving young children in Canadian history. So far, there are 142 lab-confirmed cases, and that number is expected to grow as more children who attended the affected Calgary daycares could develop symptoms. 26 children are being treated in hospital. And as Heather Yourex-West reports, some patients are now developing a related and serious kidney and blood disease.
Choo-choo! Kate Maxwell has never felt so lucky. 4-year-old Farley attends one of the Calgary daycares now associated with a growing E. coli outbreak. So far, he hasn't been sick. Still, Maxwell says she's angry.
What was going on there, and how dare you? How dare you put our children at risk when we trusted you?
While the source of the outbreak is not officially known, the number of sick children is increasing. Kids under 5 infected with E. coli are at an increased risk of developing hemolytic uremic syndrome. 2-year-old Amelia Leonard is now so sick with HUS, she requires dialysis. Her parents told to expect a lengthy month-long hospital stay.
Hey kids, I shouldn't be having to go through this. They should be kind of having fun and stuff, especially with her, because it's her birthday is next week.
The anger amongst the families impacted is palpable. On Monday, Alberta Health Services declared an outbreak at several city daycares, all connected to a central kitchen. A Calgary law firm has already filed a class action lawsuit on behalf of the families.
We want to make sure that these children's claims are protected and that we can investigate what happened here and get some answers for these families.
The number of patients diagnosed with hemolytic uremic syndrome is expected to peak over the weekend. But with so many sick, the Alberta Children's Hospital has had to add capacity.
From the pediatric perspective, I think this is as much or more pressure than we ever felt during COVID. We have opened up multiple clinics at multiple hospitals to offload the emergency department,
as they work to care for dozens and dozens of patients who are both very sick and very young. Heather Yourex-West, Global News, Calgary.
It is day 2 of the Conservative Party convention, and members are getting fired up. 2,500 delegates are meeting in Quebec City behind closed doors to debate party priorities. The day narrowed down a pile of 60 policy ideas to 30 proposals on everything from defense to energy to healthcare. Members will vote on them tomorrow. Tonight, Pierre Poilievre took the convention stage for the first time as leader to rally the grassroots. He's riding the party's growing popularity in Quebec. As David Akin reports, the Conservatives are looking to make modest but important gains there in the next federal election.
Obviously, when your name is Pierre, it's a good start.
Quebec City MP Gerard Deltel says his party's fortunes are on the rise in his province because of Pierre Poilievre and Poilievre's nearly single-minded focus on cost of living and affordability.
And after a full year of leadership of Pierre Poilievre, people discover him.
The Tories have just 9 of the province's 78 seats and are aiming to boost that to between 12 and 15 seats. Overall, that may be a small number, but it could be the difference between a majority or minority government. And so Poilievre has been busy courting Quebec. In French, the Conservative leader praised the Parti Québécois premier for balancing budgets to save social programs. He said he'd do the same. Poilievre said Quebecers set an example for all Canadians in defending their heritage.
Quebecers, and I'm saying this deliberately in English, do not apologize for their culture, their language, and their history. They celebrate it, and all Canadians should do the same.
The party is also featuring Poilievre's wife, Anna, in advertising and at party events.
It is my pleasure to share with you my husband.
Expect more of her. The party thinks she's a political asset. But outside the Conservative convention, the Liberals dispatched 2 of their Montreal MPs, one of which argued Poilievre is unqualified to lead because of his views on climate change.
Someone who claims to be a political leader in 2023 who does not even believe in climate change, who does not believe that we should be doing anything about climate change.
Now, Conservatives do indeed have a different approach to climate change, and the polls show that Canadians want every political party to have a credible plan on that issue. But Conservatives believe, as we just heard from their leader, Pierre Poilievre, that a focus on affordability and cost of living is the clearest path to electoral success, not just in this province, but in all of Canada. Neither.
All right, David Akin in Quebec City. Thanks, David. Global News has confirmed Prime Minister Justin Trudeau will be meeting with Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi on the sidelines of this weekend's G20 meetings. Climate change, food security, and Russia's invasion of Ukraine are expected to dominate the talks this year. But as Touria Izri reports, the Prime Minister has hinted that foreign interference will also be top of mind during his brief meeting with the leader of the host nation.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has landed in India and returned to a country where he carries some baggage. His last trip here was widely criticized as disastrous.
Morning, everyone.
Trudeau is looking for a redo at the G20 summit, a gathering of the world's 20 biggest economies.
It's designed to be a place where difficult but frank conversations are had.
He will have a conversation with Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi. A government source confirms the leaders will have a 10-minute pull-aside, the most informal kind of meeting, and less time than Modi will have with Canada's allies like the US and the UK.
The Trudeau messaging has sort of rubbed the wrong way in India. And I don't think there's much personal chemistry. They're very different ideologically.
Modi's face is plastered all over Delhi. The Indian Prime Minister has shut down the city, telling millions to stay home, businesses to close, and tourists to avoid the area.
This is sort of Mr. Modi's moment in the sun. On a broader scale, though, I would say that the G20 summit itself has a number of sort of clouds hanging over it.
India did not invite Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and has taken a neutral stance in the conflict. Unlike Trudeau, who insists Russia must be held accountable for what he calls their illegal war. It's unclear if the conflict will come up in their one-on-one. But Trudeau suggests he will bring up the issue of foreign election interference by countries like India. On Thursday, Canada announced it's holding a public inquiry into efforts to meddle into Canadian democracy.
We will emphasize how important the rule of law is.
The public inquiry will focus largely on Russia and China. Chinese President Xi Jinping is not coming to the G20. Neither is Russian President Vladimir Putin. Both are sending representatives in their place. Neithu?
Touria Izri in Delhi. Thanks, Touria. Hockey Canada is grappling with its history of misogyny and abuse as its new leaders hold a summit in Calgary. The organization hasn't really turned a page on last year's damning revelations it mishandled sexual assault complaints. Despite demands from MPs, the final report investigating an alleged rape involving 2018 junior team players has yet to be released. Mike Drolet reports.
After more than a year pitched in crisis, Calgary is where Hockey Canada has re-entered the public sphere with a singular focus: to change the narrative surrounding the culture of the sport. Canada's top hockey organization saw a complete turnover of its leadership roster, with a new president and CEO along with a new board of directors. And the new blood is very aware they have to deliver tangible results.
You don't want it to seem as just a box-ticking exercise. When we've done that, had a conference, come out with a few principles. We want it to be embedded. We think that this has to be part of everything that we do.
The hockey crisis reached a fever pitch earlier this year when Hockey Canada's leaders were called to Ottawa to explain how they had settled a lawsuit from a young woman who said she was raped by several members of the 2018 junior team. In the wake of the explosive testimony, sponsorship and funding money dried up, and a number of minor hockey organizations stopped paying dues to Hockey Canada.
For the first time, they've had extraordinary motivation to change, right? Because of the funding cuts, the sponsorship cuts. I mean, that was catastrophic, some of that funding cutting, right? That's happened with them. So they have to respond. There's very strong motivation to change.
The goal is to come up with a game plan that will drown out what safe sport advocate Sheldon Kennedy calls generations of systemic silence. That's just one of the hurdles he says will take years to overcome.
I think it's going to take time. And if I look at my journey, Sheldon Kennedy was in jail. Sheldon Kennedy was in mental health institutions and 7 treatment centers. And, I was the laughing stock. I was the drunk. And it takes work. It takes work. It takes honesty. It takes humility.
And above all, he says it takes a sincere willingness to change. Mike Drolet, Global News.
Last year, Hockey Canada signed on with the Office of the Sport Integrity Commissioner as part of their conditions to regain their federal funding. That office is responsible for handling complaints made at the national level. For all other complaints to provincial and club level leagues, Hockey Canada contracts an independent third party to investigate. But some are highly critical of this process. David Baxter reports.
I wish I hadn't gone through this process. I wish I hadn't reported.
This woman, who Global News granted anonymity due to potential legal recourse, had a complaint investigated by Hockey Canada's independent third party, Sport Complaints. In 2020, just before the pandemic, she discovered a man she alleges sexually assaulted her almost a decade ago worked in the same hockey league as her husband.
We didn't know what we were going to do. We almost left the country to be able to ensure that my family was protected. And then the ITP came along.
Sport Complaints was assigned to the file in late 2022. The woman says she was initially optimistic about the process, but that shifted as it progressed. After the initial investigation was complete, she brought her allegations to the police. In May, with the criminal investigation underway, she says she was asked to take part in an adjudication session with the man she accused, where he'd be able to ask her questions.
There's, risk of contamination of evidence, that there's the likelihood of him receiving evidence before he's even been questioned by police.
The woman requested the process be suspended while the police investigation was in progress. The adjudicator denied this request. In an email response, Sport Complaints says that when there are simultaneous criminal and complaint investigations, they work with police to ensure the criminal side is not compromised, adding, if police ask them to pause, they will. Shortly after the suspension request was denied, the woman formally withdrew her ITP complaint.
The feedback we have had is that the processes are dehumanizing, so lengthy that they are exhausting, that they are incredibly difficult to navigate.
Kim Shore with Gymnasts for Change is critical of these complaint processes, saying victims often feel they aren't getting justice.
This is not a sport issue. This is a human rights issue happening in sport.
Sport Complaints says they changed their policies in March 2023 based on feedback from those who have taken part in their process, stressing they are trauma-informed and aim to resolve disputes in a fair manner. But for some, they're left feeling let down.
The only thing that we wanted at the very start of this was for my husband to be able to go to work and not have a concern that he would face the person that allegedly raped his wife. And they couldn't even give us that.
David Baxter, Global News, Ottawa.
Canada's men's breakthrough run at the Basketball World Cup has sadly come to an end. Serbia handed Canada a decisive 95-86 loss today, pushing the Eastern European nation to its second finals in the last 3 tournaments. Although a championship is now out of the question, Canada will still have a chance to medal as they're set to play for bronze against the United States on Sunday. The Americans lost to Germany in the other semifinal game. Torrential rain ravages 2 regions. Coming up, the floodwaters wreaking havoc on Greece and Hong Kong. In Mali, Islamic militants have killed dozens of people in multiple attacks in the country's northeast. Today, a coalition with ties to al-Qaeda claimed responsibility for a suicide bombing at a military base near the Gao airport. Mali's military junta says a rocket attack yesterday on a riverboat near Timbuktu killed 49 people. Downstream in Bamba, insurgents attacked a military camp, killing 15 soldiers. A government statement said 50 attackers were also killed. Violence in Mali has increased after 2 coups within the last 3 years, with military rulers ordering French forces and UN peacekeepers to leave. A complex operation to rescue an American caver stranded nearly 1,000 meters underground could start tomorrow. Doctors say 40-year-old Mark Dickey has recovered enough to be extracted. He became suddenly ill with stomach bleeding during an expedition in southern Turkey. Dickey has been treated with IV fluids and 4 liters of blood. The rescue mission could last 3 or 4 days as teams lift him out through narrow openings on a stretcher. In central Greece, extreme rainfall and flooding has left hundreds stranded and at least 10 people dead. More than 1,900 rescues have taken place since the floods began to submerge entire villages on Tuesday. There are fears more people could be found dead when water levels begin to drop. Deaths from the extreme weather have also been reported in neighboring Bulgaria and Turkey. Water gushed into the streets of Hong Kong, shutting down schools and workplaces as the city was hit with its heaviest rainfall in more than 140 years. About 158 millimeters of rain fell in just 1 hour overnight, causing widespread flooding. 2 people have died and more than 140 have been injured. The future of 24 Sussex Drive ahead, the debate over what to do with the aging residents. 24 Sussex Drive is one of the most well-known buildings in this country. It's long been the traditional home of Canada's prime ministers, but Justin Trudeau and his family haven't lived there since he took office. The residence has been plagued by old age, a serious rodent problem, and major security issues. And therein lies the great dilemma: restore it or level it. Eric Sorensen reports.
The official residence hasn't been a residence since Stephen Harper moved out in 2015, and 24 Sussex needed restoration long before that.
The Prime Minister's residence at 24 Sussex Drive has had no major renovations for 50 years.
Make that 65 years now. With asbestos, old wiring and plumbing, and now rodents, is it even worth restoring for the Prime Minister? A group of heritage advocates, business people, lawyers, architects, are launching an effort to do just that.
24 Sussex is a landmark and a touchstone with people and events that have shaped our national story. It's the real thing with layers of history intact.
Originally built for a lumber baron at the time of Confederation, 24 Sussex became the Prime Minister's residence starting with Louis Saint Laurent in 1951. Since then, prime ministers have hosted world leaders, first ministers' conferences, and raised families here. It is a part of Canada's history. But it is close to Sussex Drive and highly visible, perched on cliffs above the Ottawa River. The former clerk of the Privy Council believes it is not a secure location with the threats that exist today.
My understanding is that it would be extremely difficult to make a residence on that site safe at anything like a reasonable cost.
An architect proposing restoration insists many public buildings have been made safe in Ottawa.
Properties of much greater exposure than 24 Sussex to make them secure.
The National Capital Commission found renovation would cost almost $37 million, but it's estimated a new residence that could be built in nearby Rockcliffe Park would cost $40 million.
Canadians have seen no evidence that this new build would cost a nickel less than fix-up.
In the end, it may come down not to cost, but the need for the highest possible security.
I respect the heritage and conservation argument, but I'm very sensitive to the issues around the safety of the Prime Minister and the family.
Michael Warnick says the history and the memories that have been made at 24 Sussex can be made for the next 100 years in a new home. The government says the decision could come this fall. Eric Sorensen, Global News.
Remembering Queen Elizabeth II. Next, the royal family marks 1 year since the monarch's death. Today marks 1 year since the death of Queen Elizabeth II. In tribute, King Charles III shared a previously unreleased photo of his mother taken at Buckingham Palace in 1968. Our Europe Bureau Chief Crystal Gumansing on how the senior royals and some members of the public marked the day.
A subdued crowd offering condolences to King Charles III. 1 year ago, his life changed dramatically. He lost his mother and took the throne.
In marking the first anniversary of Her late Majesty's death and my accession, we recall with great affection her long life, devoted service, and all she meant to so many of us.
I think His Majesty has done a tremendous job since then.
Ed Wang is a Canadian royal commentator. He flew to London last year to be a part of the national period of mourning.
It's so memorable seeing that coffin and being able to talk to people in that queue about why they're there and how they saw the late Queen and how they saw the monarchy.
In the afternoon, it was announced the 96-year-old Queen was under medical supervision at Balmoral Castle in Scotland. By evening, her death was made public with a royal notice posted at Buckingham Palace. The passing of Queen Elizabeth II was a historic moment noted by people right around the world, and many say they remember exactly where they were when they heard the news.
Yeah, no, of course I remember I was in a hotel where I work, yeah. And we were actually having a really sad period.
I was in Paris and I was in a taxi and on the radio it said London Bridge is down, and I didn't really get what it meant at the time until I got back home, and then I saw on the TV that the Queen had died.
Her life of service was noted Thursday by Prince Harry, who was back in the UK attending a charity event for sick children.
I know exactly 1 year on that she is looking down on all of us tonight, happy we're together, continuing to spotlight such an incredible community.
On Friday, the Prince and Princess of Wales attended a private church service, and they also met with members of the public, reinforcing a line attributed to Her late Majesty, "We have to be seen to be believed." Crystal Gamansing, Global News, London.
And that is Global National for this Friday night. I'm Neetu Garcha. Tonight's Your Canada is this abandoned tractor and barn in Bend, Saskatchewan. Thanks so much for watching. Farah Nasser will be back at the anchor desk tomorrow. Have a great weekend.